It's no secret that I am really into the world of aesthetics. If you've ever had a conversation with me about fashion or looked at my Tumblr blog, you know this. Whether it be fashion, images, or something in between. The vast variety of styles that have emerged in the last few years is truly fascinating, and social media has only made this emergence more rapid. While there is room to criticize how social media affects aesthetics, trends, and fashion, I will absolutely join this criticism as well. I still think it's fun to analyze the positives of modern aesthetic culture. Aesthetics can help people express a part of themselves that they struggle to comprehend. Aesthetics can be coping mechanisms. And aesthetics can spawn wonderfully unique fashion styles. But a major factor of many of the most popular aesthetics online right now is nostalgia. Nostalgia is defined by a longing for the past, usually a sentimental longing. Because of this, nostalgia is inherently a very personal emotion. A lot of modern aesthetic culture is associated with nostalgia in some way, and while nostalgia is always an important factor of pop culture, we have reached a point of nostalgia for the 2000s and even the 2010s. I would say the major nostalgia aesthetics, based on my opinion, include Nostalgiacore, Kidcore, Older Brothercore, Webcore, Frutiger aero, Y2K, Liminal spaces, Dreamcore, and Weirdcore. And those are the aesthetics I plan to discuss and explain in today's video. Let's begin. Let's start with an aesthetic that is definable but serves as the main umbrella of all the aesthetics in this category, Nostalgiacore. Nostalgiacore is defined by a feeling of familiarity in images that just inherently feel nostalgic. Even though these images aren't from your own lives, they still feel familiar. It's a bit hard to describe, but you'll know a Nostalgiacore image or TikTok when you see it. This aesthetic of nostalgia isn't focused around one specific IP or experience, but a collective of little things that made childhood special. Images of toys, old TVs showing cartoons from the 90s and 2000s, VHS tapes, plushies, Nintendo games. But also, Nostalgiacore is about missing the past. Unsurprisingly. Specific experiences are commonly depicted, such as nostalgia for elementary school, summertime, Halloween, Christmas, and more. As an aesthetic on its own, Nostalgiacore is defined by an almost depressing depiction of nostalgia. Nostalgiacore is characterized by a longing for the days of childhood, a desire to return to the innocence and endless positivity of our younger years. Nostalgiacore videos are often accompanied by captions that display a sense of yearning for the past and dissatisfaction with the present. As a result, Nostalgiacore is a very existential aesthetic, but one that often still brings comfort to the people who enjoy it. And it makes sense to me, because this nostalgia is earnest and personal. In modern pop culture, nostalgia is a key factor of, well, everything. And it's usually a cheap marketing tactic to play on a person's happy memories. For example, the endless sequels and remakes we all hate. But this aesthetic of nostalgia isn't for marketability. It's a genuine expression of a burning desire to return to a simpler time. It's built around a genuine appreciation and almost grief for childhood. I can't explain it other than it's raw and emotional. Whenever I see videos that features the sound of those trains or the morning birds, I get emotional. It makes me miss my childhood in the 2000s in general. Not to get too personal or anything, but these videos are inherently very personal, which is part of the charm, but also what makes the charm a bit bittersweet. It's quite the complex genre of an aesthetic core, but that's what makes it so special to me. But of course, this genre is quite broad, and so we will now discuss a variety of subgenres of Nostalgiacore that also count as nostalgic aesthetics. Next up is Kidcore. Kidcore is extremely similar to Nostalgiacore, but with two main distinctions. Number one, Kidcore is more focused on primary colors and a bright, optimistic vibe compared to the bittersweet Nostalgiacore. Number two, Kidcore has more of a fashion element compared to Nostalgiacore. Kidcore has a lot of the same imagery as Nostalgiacore in many ways. Imagery of toys, cartoons, Disney, Sanrio, Care Bears, My Little Pony, candy, stickers, and crayons are absolutely everywhere in this aesthetic. But these aesthetics are not the same. I will die on this hill. In terms of fashion, this aesthetic is defined by reds, blues, and yellows, collared shirts, overalls, denim, striped socks, old sneakers, hair clips, and shirts with cartoon characters. Also, accessories. Lots of accessories. As previously stated, the media most commonly associated with this aesthetic are Disney, Sanrio, Care Bears, and My Little Pony. Other properties commonly seen include Nintendo games, especially the DS and Wii era, and primarily Mario, Kirby, and Animal Crossing. There's also virtual worlds like Webkins and Neopets, Magical Girl Anime, Tamagotchi, Littlest Pet Shop, Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon, Blue's Clues, and more. Like I said, this is a very similar aesthetic to Nostalgiacore, but I consider Kidcore to be entirely different, because Kidcore is inherently about reliving your childhood and living a life full of childhood whimsy, while Nostalgiacore yearns for that whimsy to return. I should also mention this aesthetic that often overlaps with this one. Indie Kid. Indie Kid is a separate aesthetic that gained a lot of popularity in early 2020. However, Indie Kid is often conflated with Kidcore, hence why I'm even mentioning it. I feel like this might be a controversial take, but Indie Kid, in my opinion, is just the 2020 version of the 2010s hipster. The obsession with highly saturated filters and living life like it's a movie, where have I heard that before? But these two aesthetics, Kidcore and Indie Kid, do have one thing in common: escapism. Wow, escapism being popular in 2020, that's a surprise. But both of these aesthetics surround the idea of living life like every day is a special adventure, enjoying the little things, and spending time with your friends. And honestly, I think that's beautiful. Older Brother Core leans more into a slightly older teenage demographic of nostalgia. As the aesthetic would imply, the vibes of this aesthetic reflect a more typically masculine appearance and a particularly edgy one. Fashion-wise, this is one of the easiest aesthetics to pull off that I personally have come across, because all you really need is messy or spiky hair, maybe even dyed, baggy jeans, a dark graphic tee related to a band, some Vans shoes, and you're golden. Though this aesthetic is also defined by flannels, hoodies, beanies, and belt buckles. As you can probably tell, this aesthetic is very reminiscent of emo and skater fashion. The perfect muse of this aesthetic is, and please hear me out on this one, Roderick Heffley from Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I am dead serious. He's got an edgy attitude, he dresses in a grungy way, he's in a band, he's gender envy, he's the ultimate cool older brother of the 2000s. Even though the first film came out in 2010, but whatever. Other imagery associated with this aesthetic include food and drinks such as Dorito chips, pizza, slushies, Mountain Dew, and energy drinks, but specifically Monster energy drinks. In terms of iconography, this aesthetic is absolutely defined by video games and music. In terms of music, the main bands associated with this aesthetic are alternative rock and hip-hop music like Green Day, Linkin Park, MF Doom, System of a Down, Gorillaz, Nirvana, Limp Bizkit, Korn, and Deftones. In terms of games, the main franchises represented are Call of Duty, Halo, Grand Theft Auto, Guitar Hero, Doom, Devil May Cry, Mortal Kombat, and Resident Evil. The most common imagery of this core is dingy bedrooms with TVs playing one of the aforementioned games, shelves of CDs, cans of Monster, and guitars. And other things associated with this aesthetic include arcades, house parties, and graffiti. This aesthetic has been gaining popularity lately, obviously on TikTok. There is also a similar aesthetic called Older Sister Core, which is less popular, but I still think it's cool. It's yet to really catch on, but it's most comparable to the McBling aesthetic, which we will discuss later. And hopefully this aesthetic catches on soon because I like it. And I also like Older Brother Core, I think it's fun. Webcore is an aesthetic that is based around a very specific era of the internet, that being the 2000s and sometimes early 2010s internet. This is an era of the internet before social media monopolized it, an era defined by possibility and curiosity, where any random silly little video could reach a larger audience than ever before. It was an era of individuality where everyone had their own special little corner of the web. Nowadays, a lot of people are very bored by the modern internet, for good reason. So it really doesn't surprise me that people miss the feeling of being a starry-eyed kid on the family computer watching whatever wacky YouTube videos they come across. This is what has resulted in Webcore. Webcore is quite the diverse aesthetic. Visually, it is defined by the layout of Windows XP as well as the specific style of early website design, with a clunky layout and a million flashing, choppy GIFs. Applications like MS Paint and KidPix or the iconic imagery and UI of Windows XP are also commonly featured. If you want a series that embodies the type of visuals often seen in Webcore, look no further than Joel G's Enna franchise. The surreal, low-poly visuals and camera POVs that make the videos feel like an old screensaver, Enna has absolutely become synonymous with Webcore. Early YouTube viral videos or memes are also commonly featured, such as Nyan Cat or Caramel Dancin', but also there is a lot of representation of the website Newgrounds. Newgrounds was at its height around the early 2000s and had a huge presence in this era, so it makes sense for it to be a part of Webcore. And in fact, many of the iconic viral videos of YouTube were actually reposted from Newgrounds. So the old Flash games and animations of Newgrounds are also a huge factor of Webcore. In terms of media associated with this aesthetic, I would say the show that best represents Webcore is undoubtedly 1998's Serial Experiments Lain. This show is honestly a bit hard to explain even as someone who has watched the show, but that is part of its charm. Serial Experiments Lain is a show about the internet at a time where the internet was starting to become a bigger part of culture. It's a very interesting portrayal of the web and how it can impact relationships and reality itself. I think it's easy to tell that I really love this anime. But on the topic of anime, the 2000s internet is heavily associated with anime for a reason. The 2000s was a very important time period for the medium, as the internet helped people connect over anime and discuss it more easily. As a result, Webcore often aligns with 2000s anime as well as the anime core aesthetic. Popular anime represented include Lucky Star, Watamote, Azumanga Daioh, K-On!, Ouran High School Host Club, Fruits Baskets, and pretty much every popular magical girl anime. Video games that are often associated with anime like Touhou are also strongly featured in the Webcore aesthetic. In a similar vein, Vocaloid was also first released in the early 2000s and very quickly became a worldwide phenomenon. As you may know, Vocaloid has a large overlap with the anime communities, and the most famous Vocaloid, Hatsune Miku, is commonly associated with the early web, so Vocaloid is also associated with Webcore. Though a few songs tend to be represented the most frequently, mainly the Miku cover of Ivan Polka, World Is Mine, Popipo, Triple Baka, and Teto Territory. And yes, I know Teto is not a Vocaloid, I know she's an Utao, but she's a major figure in the Vocaloid community, so shh. There is also a variety of music associated with this aesthetic, namely Oliver Buckland, Metaroom, Graham Kartna, Infinity Frequencies, and Windows 96. Webcore is a very layered aesthetic that captures an era of time we can never really go back to, at least not in the way we want to, which is a bit of a shame, but it's also the reason I greatly enjoy this aesthetic so much, because it manages to capture this exact era of time. This is another web-based aesthetic, but I figured it kind of deserves its own section. Frutiger aero is a specific type of design aesthetic that was popular around the late 2000s, early 2010s, specifically in the tech industry, and has since gained a massive resurgence on TikTok. While Webcore is emblematic of the internet we did experience and is all about reminiscing on the past, Frutiger aero is often described as the future we were promised. It represents a design era of technological optimism that we've never really been able to reach since. This style of image is defined by glossy textured backgrounds, bright skies and colors, bubbles, fish, and grassy terrain. It is undoubtedly a very joyous aesthetic, with a chill, relaxing, almost summertime vibe. The IP most commonly associated with Frutiger aero other than Windows Vista and Windows 7 is absolutely the Nintendo Wii, specifically the Wii Sports and Wii Party games, and Wii Music is often featured in the Frutiger aero playlist that you'll see on YouTube. Though the song that absolutely defines this aesthetic is most definitely Lise from My Merry May soundtrack, which is a 2002 visual novel for the Dreamcast, which was later ported to the PlayStation 2. In many ways, this song is sort of the theme song of Frutiger aero, as it is absolutely the most used song in Frutiger aero TikToks and playlists. Frutiger aero also has a wide variety of subgenre aesthetics that were similarly popular in this time frame. These include Frutiger Metro, Frutiger Eco, Dark Aero, Techno Zen, Vector Garden, Dorfic, and more. All of these aesthetics are similar to the design trends that defined Frutiger aero, but with minor differences, such as Dark Aero featuring blacks and grays and Frutiger Metro utilizing splashes of color. Maybe in a future video I'll go more in detail on the Frutiger family, as it's called. Ultimately, Frutiger aero is a really calming aesthetic, and I completely understand why it has caught on so much lately. This one is a bit of an umbrella category in the nostalgia aesthetic umbrella category. An umbrella in an umbrella. As such, this entry is going to be a lot more simple. Unless I decide to make a follow-up video or something. Y2K is a term used to define several design and fashion aesthetic trends that were popular around the 90s and 2000s. This aesthetic is named after the hysteria surrounding the year 2000, a phenomenon where people believed that the year 2000 would be the end of the world due to the way computer clocks operated, and as such would result in a lot of societal collapses. That's kind of simplifying the situation, but we really don't have time to explain that, as it's not really relevant to the nature of the Y2K aesthetic stuff, and it's also not what this video is about. But the point is, this era was heavily defined by futuristic inspiration, which resulted in a wide variety of kooky, futuristic visuals and fashions. The general style of Y2K is defined by sleek, glossy visuals, but not as brightly colored as Frutiger aero. Y2K is almost sci-fi in its design, and like Frutiger aero, Y2K has a bunch of subgenres. These include Y2K Futurism, Gen X Soft Club, Fantasy Y2K, McBling, 90s Cool, Metal Heart, Chromecore, and more. Y2K Futurism, Gen X Soft Club, Metal Heart, and Chromecore are all defined by sci-fi graphics and futuristic colors. This was around the time that CGI was starting to become a bigger deal, so many of the promotional graphics that fit into these aesthetics were made with CGI. These aesthetics all look kind of similar, but have very subtle differences. For example, Metal Heart is more cyberpunk in nature, while Chromecore is entirely sleek and gray. Fantasy Y2K is a combination of medieval fantasy aesthetics with the fashion trends of the 2000s. Good examples of this include media like the cartoon Winx Club and the movie Ella Enchanted. McBling is a fashion style defined by bright hot pinks and blacks along with glittery sequins. A good example of this aesthetic in media is the movie Mean Girls. Pretty much everything about that movie just embodies McBling, both in fashion and in terms of attitude. This aesthetic is also heavily defined by the celebrity culture of the time, with notable figures of McBling including Hilary Duff, Paris Hilton, and Britney Spears. McBling is essentially the feminine version of older brothercore, as I mentioned earlier. 90s cool is more of a pop culture trend, but it has elements of aesthetics. It was heavily defined by the hype surrounding the movie The Matrix and media that was released after said hype. And considering The Matrix is a sci-fi dystopia, it's not too surprising it was lumped into Y2K trends. Honestly, Y2K deserves an entire separate video because I find the whole phenomenon fascinating, and there is a wide variety of aesthetics that just happen to fall under this category. But these aesthetics are heavily defined by a specific type of fantasy that is neither purely optimistic or purely pessimistic. Sure, the future portrayed in these images is often very cold and metallic, but there remains a sense of innovation and imagination throughout it all. It's far from the minimalist hellscape that we actually live in today, and I think that's kind of awesome. Liminal spaces are a strange case. I wouldn't say it's entirely an aesthetic, but I figured I would mention it since it leads well into the next two aesthetics. The best way to explain liminal spaces is to analyze the most popular example of liminal spaces, the backrooms. And when I say that, I mean the original backrooms. Honestly, the backrooms are such a strange case, with internet users exaggerating it and even big companies planning to make movies based on it. But back in the day, the concept was incredibly simple. The concept surrounded an uneasy feeling around locations that looked familiar but lacked any other human life. And that is what liminal spaces are. Empty malls, schools during summertime, movie theater halls, abandoned play places, and playgrounds at night. These are all examples of what we would call a liminal space. Liminal spaces are often triggers for anemoia, which is a feeling of nostalgia for something you are not familiar with. A common experience people have witnessing liminal space images is an uneasy sense of recognizability, even if you've never actually visited the place featured in the image. A general feeling of, I somehow recognize this place and feel as if I have visited despite knowing I did not. Which, considering the type of buildings that are often associated with liminal spaces, malls, play places, school buildings, it makes sense to me. It triggers a similar sense of weird emotions and familiarity that Nostalgiacore images do, but the major difference is liminal spaces are more lonely. Nostalgiacore images often feature other people in them. Liminal spaces do not. A good example of this strange mixture of emotions is Super Mario 64. If you remember the rise of fan-made horror content for Super Mario 64 around 2020-2021, you might know where this is going. Many people have spoken out about Super Mario 64 having an unnerving feeling, one very reminiscent of liminal spaces. The levels are entirely populated by enemies and have strange, otherworldly layouts as they float in an empty sky. Sure, the game is vibrant and colorful, the music is fun, and the game is ultimately very lighthearted, but it still has a strange sense of emptiness to it. The world most commonly cited as having an uneasy feeling in players was Wet Dry World, but the whole game in general is considered an example of this phenomenon. And as I mentioned, liminal spaces are kind of the backbone of the next two aesthetics. Dreamcore is an aesthetic that has gained a lot of popularity on TikTok, especially around 2020, and it is defined by a surreal feeling comparable to the uncanny valley. Essentially, it emulates the visuals one may see in a dream. Much of Dreamcore imagery features similar traits of liminal spaces, weird locations that feel familiar but off in some way, often with unnatural, bright colors and impossible structures. Unlike most of the previous aesthetics, this aesthetic relies more on editing existing images, with common imagery including suburbs and flower fields, and Dreamcore images are often highly saturated and sometimes feature ominous text overlaid on top. There's a general theme of familiarity and disconnection simultaneously. As previously mentioned, this is one of the aesthetics most commonly associated with liminal spaces. Movies and shows that are associated with both liminal spaces and Dreamcore include Eraserhead, The Truman Show, Edward Scissorhands, I Saw the TV Glow, Us, Severance, and Twin Peaks. Games that are aligned with these aesthetics include Omori, Off, Minecraft, Yume Nikki, and LSD Dream Simulator. I mentioned Enna previously in this video, and Enna is another series that heavily connects to the surreal nature of Dreamcore. While the animations are heavily stylized with old web aesthetics, the series is also very confusing and metaphorical. I can't really say what the series represents, but it represents a lot of things. You should definitely trust me on this. That is to say, you should also really check out Enna. Specifically the Enna game Enna Dream Barbecue. Dream Barbecue is a very strange and wacky experience with unique character designs, and it is also free, so you should get it. That's the message of this section. Check out Enna. You'll understand it. You'll understand everything I'm saying about Enna if you see Enna. It makes sense if you watch it. You should go watch Enna, because Enna's really good. Our last aesthetic of this video, Weirdcore. And it really is a weird one. It shares a lot of similarities with Dreamcore on a surface level, but I consider these two to be different aesthetics. Weirdcore is more unsettling than Dreamcore. It features similar imagery of liminal spaces and surreal visuals, but with more potentially creepy elements like eye, angel, and mushroom imagery. Weirdcore, like many other core aesthetics, started to gain popularity on Tumblr before it became much more recognizable on TikTok. Weirdcore gained a strange but prominent life on TikTok in 2020, especially alongside Dreamcore. One major difference of Weirdcore compared to Dreamcore is the popularization of Weirdcore OCs. If you remember the wave on TikTok of photoshopped object head OCs and TV heads, then those are Weirdcore OCs. People would often make little stories with these OCs through videos. These videos often used RPG-style text boxes and text-to-speech voices. These stories often featured themes of derealization and dissociation. There are also specific songs commonly associated with Weirdcore. A lot of Weirdcore playlists feature one of, if not all of these songs. I'd Rather Sleep by Quero Quero Bonito, Hey Kids by Molina, Still Life by Sitcom, Homage by Mild High Club, Fallen Down by Undertale, Nice Boys by Temporex, 647 by Instupendo, Dust Collector by YG Hypnos, It's Just a Burning Memory by The Caretaker, My Son Venus from Minecraft, any song by Jack Stauber, just like any, but most likely either Two Time or Baby Hotline. And there also might be some songs from the Omori and Yume Nikki OSTs. It's kind of become a running joke online that every Weirdcore and Dreamcore playlist features the exact same set list. One trend related to Weirdcore that I think is important to mention is the Roblox worlds with this theme. There were many Roblox hangout spaces that were based on the Weirdcore aesthetic. A lot of Roblox maps are just big worlds for people to hang out in and chat with each other, and there were plenty of surreal maps enjoyed by Weirdcore fans, which ties this aesthetic back into the themes of escapism that pretty much every other aesthetic I talked about embodies in some way. Nostalgia as a coping mechanism is often tied to the desire to escape the stressful current reality, and Weirdcore is all about escaping reality in a way. Weirdcore often creates an uncomfortable sense of dread and unease. It can often be disturbing, especially if you have conditions like scopophobia, but it still feels nostalgic in a roundabout way. It's like a warped perception of the same bittersweet energy that Nostalgicore emulates. This is honestly another aesthetic that deserves its own entire video because the whole trend is just so unique in only a way that internet trends can be. So ultimately, what can we say about the correlation between nostalgia and the core aesthetics of the internet? Well, I think this is a natural side effect of the evolution of the internet. Nostalgia is an essential part of pop culture, but due to the rise of the internet, it appears in different forms now. Nostalgia is comforting, but also unsettling, and these aesthetics reflect that. All of these aesthetics range in terms of their comfort, but they all have the ability to bring comfort to people. I find all of these aesthetics comforting in one way or another. When it comes to Nostalgiacore and Kidcore, I find it validating as someone who believes optimism is important to life. Sure, we can never go back, but we can strive to enjoy life now. And while I completely understand why some people find Dreamcore and Weirdcore disturbing, it's just so interesting to me. It's a distortion of nostalgia and familiarity. It's a distortion of things we vaguely remember. All of these aesthetics are united under nostalgia, and of course, the heavy romanticization of nostalgia can be harmful. It's no secret the 2000s had an ugly side, and that list of ugly sides is long as hell. Especially the 2000s internet. But I don't think there's anything wrong in using those good memories as inspiration for the media we create now. Honestly, the only reason I still use TikTok is for Nostalgicore related videos. And I am biased as someone with a huge passion for nostalgia as an entire emotion. But I think it's important to not completely dwell on the past, but rather use it as the basis to help us move forward. And that's my takeaway anyway.